In the beginning days of lighting a scene, especially very low key and dark scenes where I'm bringing in all of the lighting and there's no ambient lighting like daylight to rely on, I always felt like I was missing something. And I never knew what it was. I'd put in a key light, I'd put in an accent, another pop of color, but it always felt empty. And I couldn't figure out what it was for the longest time. And I finally figured it out, and it's something that's so important and something that we are talking on today. But before we get started, my name is Brady. Welcome and/or welcome back to the channel. If you like this video or any of the other videos on this channel, I'm gonna leave a little red button just for you called the subscribe button right down there, and click it if you like this video. Now, I bet you're looking at this, and it's not product placement, but since we're on the topic of cuts, right now on their website, there's a Black Friday deal going on for 30% off. Shirts like this, plenty of other stuff. Just go check it out. But diving into the video, we're talking about room tone. What's room tone? Something that works to our advantage when we're working on an interior scene during daylight is that we have this natural ambience bouncing throughout the house, and then we kind of control how much or how little of that we do want. But when we're working with, say, a night scene, or shooting at night, or in a building where there are no lights, we need to bring in all the lighting and make lighting feel natural, because that's our goal. We need our cinematography and our shots to look like it's naturally lit. We don't want it to look sourcey. So by bringing in the element of room tone, which is just this general ambience throughout the room, it brings up the level, and especially all of the blacks from being crushed and desaturated and just no data or information there at all. So I put together a night interior scene that I thought would do a great job of showing the impact of room tone and the benefits that it has on your shot. So now, looking at myself with just this one warm key light, you see that there's no information in the rest of the room. Everything is dark and it feels just very flat. There's not a lot of depth going on, not a lot of texture, not a lot of contrast. It's just myself in the darkness. So now by adding in room tone, you can see that there's just this dim ambience throughout the entire room, that you get a little bit of edge lights on some of the objects in the frame. You just get a glow on my hair light, or a hair light on my hair as well, and just this really dim ambience, but it's not too bright, because in this night interior we're kind of going for a moonlight vibe. So moonlight's not going to be daylight and bright and all, but if you're shooting a daylight interior, then you probably want to bump up the ambience on this light as well, and we're going to get to how in just a moment. But just going back to talking about the color contrast, which we'll talk on as well, you can see that the cool tones bring focus to the warm tones on myself, and then the warm tones bring focus to the cool tones throughout the entire room. So that's a little bit of a synopsis on room tone. The ultimate goal of it is just to bring up some ambience and some levels so you can actually see some of the detail in your frame. Even if you don't want it and your objective is to be shooting in the dark or at night in a very dark room, you still want to have some sort of level there and not completely crush the blacks until where there's no information. Now, so let's go into how we lit this scene and a little bit of my camera settings as well. What was my white balance? Thanks to B-roll, my white balance was 4,000. So camera settings, I had a Blackmagic Pocket 4K, my go-to camera, with a Sigma 18-35 lens on, as well as a Black Pro Mist 1/8 strength and a 2-stop ND tip and filter, which we're going to get to in just a second. I know we're shooting at night, what's the point? It'll make sense in a second. So the first light that was on me, I bounced around at first. I was like, do I want a monochromatic look? Do I want some color contrast? And I settled on motivating a key light on me based off of this warm tungsten lamp. I knew I needed to control my light and really keep it isolated on myself in kind of the immediate vicinity right around me, because the objective of this entire scene was to have majorly cool tones and a cool color temperature, other than that warm tones just on myself. So to do this, I used an Aperture 300D Mark II, and I had a light dome on that, and on the light dome I put just a grid, like I said, to isolate that light only on me. I didn't want it spilling around. And then in that in the 300D, I took just a color temperature orange, a CTO gel, and clamped it in on the little magnetic clamps that come with the Aperture light domes. So that was just to bring the color temperature down to about 2700 Kelvin, motivated by that warm light. And then to further dial in and really control this light, I just took a piece of black foam card, put it on a stand, and put it right in front of the light dome just to control it from spilling on the counter too much, because your eyes will go to the brightest part of the image, and it seemed like that counter area was turning out to be a lot brighter than myself. So I just dialed some of that back, cut out and flagged off some of that warm light that was on the countertop, leaving it just to be pretty much on myself. Now, right off the bat, we got the 300D with a CTO gel, softbox, and a grid. That's just for the key light, but also I was having issues with the color temperature of the existing bulb that was in that lamp right there, so I took it out and just put an aperture B7C. Of course, if you don't have that all the time, I got a comment in one of my last videos about what I do for dimming practicals, and a lot of the times I have a Home Depot dimmer. Okay, I can't find it right now, but it's just a Home Depot dimmer that you plug into the wall, you plug the light into that, and then you have full control over the dimming. But I didn't like the color temperature matching up with the 300D, so I just took a B7C, stuck it in there, had it at 2700 as well, just to match up the color temperature. So those essentially are the first two lights. You've got the 300D and the B7 bulb as this motivation and this light source for this warm area around me. So now to get to the room tone, which is the purpose of this video. There's a lot of ways to do this, and the best way that I find ambient as far as room tone goes is to just bounce it off the ceiling if you've got white ceilings or low ceilings. The ceiling acts as just a really big white bounce card, which works in your favor, especially if you're on a budget. Sometimes if I'm working on a little bit more intricate projects, I might diffuse it and then bounce it off the ceiling, or bounce it off the ceiling and then diffuse it through like a 8x8 half grid or something like that. But for the sake of this tutorial, I know a lot of us don't always have a bunch of equipment on hand to work with, so I just bounced a Aperture Nova off of the ceiling. And with this Aperture Nova, I had it set to 5600 Kelvin just to match up with the window light, which we are going to get to. And I used a Nova just because it's a panel, it's a large source, it's soft. So to get this really soft ambience without having to diffuse it many times, I just went to the Nova. But if you have just a single source light, maybe bounce it off of something white that's kind of like this white bounce card right there. Yeah, you can see it. Just take a white foam cord bounce card, and then diffuse it off the ceiling, because then you'll have kind of like two steps of diffusion, bouncing it off, softening it even more. But in this case, I used an Aperture Nova at 5600 Kelvin, and I added on the barn doors to it because I noticed that it was spilling a little bit on the walls, on me, and then it was a very direct source, and you could see that there was clearly a light there. So by having the barn doors, I controlled it from only going up off the ceiling, and then from the ceiling it dispersed evenly throughout the room. And I had this very dim. I want to say it was at about like 15%. Didn't need a lot of oomph at all. It was just, again, to bring up a little bit of the level so all of the blacks in the room weren't completely crushed. And I also placed the Nova not just in any random place, I put it right out of frame, bouncing off the ceiling, so then immediately when it came down onto me, it was already acting as a rim light on my shadow side, the side of me that was really in the darks and in the blacks and in the shadows. So that kind of first place that the light will hit, and the strongest place that the light's going to hit, is going to be immediately in the shadows where I wanted it. So be mindful of that when you're placing it. You don't want to kill all the shadows and have it very front lit. So that's why I kind of had it from the back, or from at least the very side of the frame, so it wasn't front lighting all of the shadows in the shot. So 3 lights down, let's go ahead and talk about the last one. And this all wraps up the whole ND filter situation that we had in the morning. It was raining when I first started this scene, and I was like, well, this is the only time I have to shoot this, so I gotta make do with what I've got. The Aperture 600D is pretty weather resistant. I don't know the level of it, so if you have this and you're watching it, don't listen to me. It may not be weather resistant at all, but from what I've seen, what has been advertised, it does pretty well in the rain. So I decided to use that as my window light that is going to just bounce in a little bit as some moonlight coming from the outdoors. So on that, I had an Aperture 600D, 5600 Kelvin to match up with the Nova. And then I had the F10 Fresnel on there as well, shining in the window and through the shears, how I've kind of done in the past in the same location. Just creating a little bit of contrast and texture. And also this light motivated this cool tone for this general ambience in the room. So that and the room tone kind of go hand in hand together. The idea is that this moonlight shining in through the window is the motivation for this general ambience. You're kind of tricking the viewer into thinking that this one light coming through the window is making all this ambient light throughout the entire room, which is a lie, and this is what we're learning here. So the reason for the ND filter in the beginning is that this light is so bright that this light I had set to 0.1%, not even 1%, 0.1, and it was still too strong for what I wanted. And it was raining. I didn't want to switch it out. I didn't want to risk anything else getting damaged. So instead, I just put ND on my lens like I would for bright daylight. Honestly, I could have flagged it off. I could have put like a little net in front of it just to stop it down a little bit. But again, it was raining. I didn't want to go out there. I just left it how it was. So that's the reasoning for it. And, you know, that just goes to show that you don't need all of these strong lights. 0.1% is all we needed for this outdoor moonlight. And I really liked how subtle it went through the shears and the blinds and the windows, just to create that really like contrasty texture, because the goal is when we're lighting a scene is to have this like kind of streaks of or pops of texture as you're going across the frame left to right. You want to have some bright spots, you want to have some dark spots, some bright spots, some dark spots, and you really have that in this frame, especially given by these shears and these textured kind of bright and dark areas. So 4 lights, or 3.5 if you want to count the bulb, just that practical bulb. But it's a really simple setup and it's really fun, and I didn't have any other diffusion. I didn't have anything like negs or flags further than what I talked about in the key light. And it was a really fun setup just to show the importance of room tone in a scene. Room tone is very important, and that was that missing gap that I had in a lot of my dark night scenes, is that I focus on just lighting items and people and windows, but I didn't focus on the general ambience and just bringing up like this natural level into the scene. And that's something that I took so long to really grasp, and I'm really enjoying it. Of course, there's a time and place for using it or for not using it, or having top light or not top light, but I really like the look that it gives. It's very subtle, it's very just natural, and I'm happy with it. And I hope that you're happy with it. So we're gonna wrap this up here. If you liked this video, again, that little red button I put there just for you, or YouTube put it there just for me, I guess, for you to click. But please hit it, or the like button, share it with a friend, do what you gotta do. And until then, actually, I've been meaning to ask you guys if you're still sticking around, so I'll know who's watching, if you're watching here, but at this point or not. Anyway, I'm gonna get to the point. I've been meaning to ask you for other video recommendations that you guys would all like, because I'm curious, and I know that I've just been really focused in getting to the grindstone of doing all these videos, but I want to hear what you guys have to suggest. So short story may be very long because I ramble, and you know that by now. Leave a comment down below if there is a particular video that you would like to see out of me, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Don't forget, cuts, 30% off. I'll leave a link down below. I'm gonna drink my coffee, edit this, go to bed. Cheers.